We often think of medieval life as dirty, brutal, and primitive. But what if the people of that time actually knew survival tricks that modern preppers and survivalists have completely overlooked? Without electricity, modern tools, or internet, they built systems that kept them fed, warm, and alive in the harshest conditions imaginable. In this video, you'll discover 7 forgotten medieval survival methods that have been lost to time, techniques so effective they could still save your life today. And at the end, a surprising truth. They may have understood something about resilience that our modern world has completely forgotten. 1. Portable fire bundles, the medieval matchbox. In a world without matches or lighters, medieval people developed something far more reliable than just flint and steel. They created portable fire systems that could travel for days. The fire bundle was a medieval invention that few modern survivalists have mastered. It wasn't just about starting fire, it was about maintaining it. Using hollow plant stems like elder or reed, peasants would insert smoldering embers, then seal both ends with clay or wax. The limited oxygen inside kept the ember alive but prevented it from consuming itself. These bundles could be carried in leather pouches or wooden containers for days, sometimes weeks. When needed, the carrier would crack open the stem, transfer the ember to tinder, and blow it back to life. No sparks needed, no friction required, just patient preservation of an existing flame. Travelers and shepherds often carried multiple fire bundles, rotating them as needed. Some were designed with small air holes that could be covered or uncovered to control burn rate. Others used specific fungi that could smolder for extraordinary periods, the record being a tinder fungus that reportedly kept an ember alive for over 2 months. The genius wasn't in creating fire, it was in never letting it die. Monasteries maintained eternal flames using similar principles, keeping fire alive through generations without interruption. For medieval people, this wasn't just convenience, it was security. A guaranteed flame meant survival in wet conditions where starting fresh fire was nearly impossible. And today, this forgotten technique could be the difference between warmth and exposure when modern fire starters fail. Unlike matches or lighters that eventually run out, the fire bundle system creates a closed loop, a perpetual resource that, with care, never needs replacement. What makes it genius isn't that it worked back then. It's that we've forgotten it now, when we might need it most. 2. Smoke preservation beyond meat. Today, we think of smoking as something for flavor, a way to make bacon or salmon taste better. But medieval people understood smoking as a complete preservation system that went far beyond meat, a system modern preppers have largely forgotten. Medieval smoke chambers weren't just for protein. They were multi-purpose preservation tools for everything from grains to medicines to textiles. The process began with understanding smoke chemistry. Different woods produced different compounds that preserved in different ways. For grains susceptible to weevils and moths, smoke from juniper or pine created a protective barrier that insects wouldn't cross. Sacks of wheat, barley, or rye were hung in smoke chambers for days, then stored in smoke-infused containers. The result? Grains that could last years longer than untreated stores. Herbs and medicines were smoke-cured to concentrate their properties and extend shelf life. Certain healing plants actually became more potent after smoke exposure, something herbalists knew but rarely documented on. The smoke altered the chemical composition, sometimes creating compounds that weren't present in the fresh plant. Even textiles benefited. Linen and wool exposed to smoke from specific woods became naturally water-resistant and less attractive to moths. Ropes and fishing nets treated with smoke lasted longer in wet conditions. Even leather was smoke-cured to create water resistance without the oils that would eventually go rancid. The most sophisticated smoke preservation happened in specialized chambers with multiple zones: hot smoke near the bottom for meat, cooler smoke in the middle for grains, and the gentlest smoke at the top for delicate herbs and medicines. Nothing was wasted. Everything was transformed. This wasn't just preservation. It was alchemy, turning the perishable into the permanent using nothing but carefully controlled smoke. For modern preppers focused only on smoking meat, this medieval knowledge offers a forgotten dimension. A complete preservation system that requires no electricity, chemicals, or modern equipment, just fire, patience, and knowledge that's been all but lost. 3. Living fences, security and sustenance. Long before barbed wire or electric fencing, medieval communities created something far more ingenious: living barriers that provided both protection and food, a concept almost entirely abandoned by modern homesteaders. The hedge-laying technique created impenetrable barriers by partially cutting young trees and shrubs, then bending and weaving them horizontally. As they healed, these plants would grow both vertically and horizontally, creating a living wall that couldn't be cut or burned easily. But these weren't just barriers. They were deliberately designed ecosystems. Hawthorn and blackthorn provided the defensive structure with their vicious thorns, while fruit trees, nuts, and berries were interwoven to provide food. Medicinal plants like elder and willow were incorporated for their healing properties. The result? A security system that fed you, healed you, and became stronger every year instead of degrading. These living fences required specific maintenance. Yearly cutting and weaving, always in winter when the sap was down, kept them dense and growing in the right patterns. Some medieval hedgerows became so established that they outlived the villages they protected, still standing centuries after their creators died. The most sophisticated versions included hedge ports, disguised gaps known only to locals that could be quickly sealed in times of danger. Others incorporated ditches on the outside and raised berms on the inside, creating a complete defensive perimeter. Wildlife used these hedges as corridors between forests, bringing hunting opportunities directly to the village boundary. Birds nesting in the hedges controlled insect populations in nearby fields. Even the yearly trimmings became valuable, providing materials for baskets, tools, and fuel. This wasn't just a fence. It was a living infrastructure that provided security, food, medicine, and ecological services simultaneously. For modern homesteaders who spend thousands on fencing that eventually fails, this medieval technique offers something remarkable: protection that grows stronger, not weaker, with time, while feeding you in the process. The living fence wasn't primitive. It was the ultimate expression of working with nature instead of against it. 4. Clay batteries, medieval power storage. Before plastic containers, refrigerators, or modern storage systems, medieval people mastered a technology that's been almost completely forgotten: clay batteries. Vessels designed to store not electricity, but something equally valuable: cold, heat, and preservation potential. These weren't simple pots. They were engineered systems with specific designs for different purposes. The most common was the cooling amphora, a double-walled clay vessel with the space between walls filled with wet sand. As water evaporated through the porous outer clay, it pulled heat from the inner chamber, creating a cooling effect without ice. Food stored in these vessels stayed fresh days longer than in ordinary containers. Milk could remain sweet, meat wouldn't spoil as quickly, and fruits maintained freshness, all without a single cube of ice. But cooling was just the beginning. Heat batteries worked on the opposite principle. Specially formulated clay mixed with materials like crushed stone or metal filings was formed into bricks or discs. These were heated in ovens or fires, then wrapped in wool or linen. The dense material would release heat slowly for hours, sometimes all night. Travelers carried smaller versions in pockets or pouches. Shepherds placed them in their cloaks. On the coldest nights, these heat batteries were tucked into bedding, keeping sleepers warm until dawn without the danger of open flames. The most sophisticated clay batteries were the preservation chambers, sealed vessels with precise mixtures of ash, salt, and herbs lining the interior. These created microclimates that dramatically extended the life of seeds, grains, and even certain medicines. Some monastery records mention seeds remaining viable for decades in these chambers. What made these systems remarkable wasn't just their effectiveness, it was their regenerative nature. Unlike modern disposables, clay batteries could be reactivated thousands of times. A cooling amphora worked for generations. Heat batteries could be reheated indefinitely. For modern preppers focused on battery-powered solutions with limited lifespans, these medieval technologies offer something profound. Storage systems that never wear out, require no rare materials, and can be made from the earth itself. Medieval power wasn't about volts or watts. It was about understanding how materials store and transfer energy, knowledge we've nearly lost in our battery-dependent world. 5. Friction glaze, medieval waterproofing. Before Gore-Tex, plastic coatings, or chemical sealants, medieval people developed waterproofing technology so effective they could keep you dry in a downpour, using materials modern survivalists walk past every day. The most remarkable was friction glaze, a waterproof coating created without any modern ingredients. The process began with collecting specific tree resins, usually pine, spruce, or birch. These were heated and mixed with rendered animal fat and beeswax in precise proportions, then allowed to cool into a paste. The genius was in the application. Rather than simply coating fabric or leather, medieval people used friction to transform the material at a fiber level. The paste was rubbed vigorously into the material, sometimes for hours, generating heat that opened the fibers and allowed the mixture to penetrate completely. Once cooled, the treated material became remarkably waterproof while remaining breathable, something modern, synthetic waterproofing still struggles to achieve. Rain would bead and roll off, but sweat could still escape. Cloaks, boots, tent coverings, and bags treated with friction glaze could last for years with occasional reapplication. Hunters and shepherds who spent weeks exposed to the elements relied on this technology to prevent hypothermia and keep their belongings dry. The most sophisticated versions included additives like crushed charcoal for UV protection, certain mineral powders for flexibility in cold, or specific herbs to repel insects. Each region developed its own formula based on local materials. What made the system remarkable was its self-sufficiency. Every ingredient could be harvested or produced locally. No factories, chemicals, or global supply chains needed. Just knowledge passed from generation to generation. For modern outdoor enthusiasts who replace expensive waterproof gear every few years, this medieval technology offers something revolutionary. A system you can create yourself, maintain indefinitely, and adapt to any natural material, using ingredients found in any forest. Medieval waterproofing wasn't primitive. It was the perfect balance of effectiveness and sustainability, a balance we've lost in our petroleum-based waterproofing world. 6. Sound navigation, the forgotten sense. Before GPS, compasses, or even reliable maps, medieval travelers developed a navigation system modern hikers have completely forgotten. Sound wayfinding, using the acoustic environment to determine location, direction, and safety. This wasn't just about hearing obvious sounds, it was a sophisticated system of reading the acoustic landscape. Travelers learned to identify their position by the way sound behaved in different environments. The echo pattern of a shout could reveal the presence of a valley. The dampening of distant sounds might indicate approaching rain or snow. Medieval pilgrims and merchants developed sound maps, mental guides of how different regions should sound. The birds of one forest were different from another. The wind through oak leaves created different tones than through pine. Even the sound of one's own footsteps changed based on soil type, elevation, and moisture. Water was particularly important in sound navigation. Experienced travelers could determine the direction of streams from over a mile away by the specific frequencies that carried through forest or field. Some could even estimate the size of a water source by its acoustic signature. In fog, darkness, or dense forest where visual navigation failed, sound became the primary sense. Travelers would periodically create noise, clapping, singing, or striking wood against wood to read the returning echoes. The information gathered could prevent walking in circles or heading toward dangerous terrain. The most skilled practitioners could even use sound to predict weather changes hours before visual signs appeared. Certain bird calls, insect sounds, or shifts in how distant noises carried signaled specific weather patterns, critical knowledge when shelter needed to be found quickly. This wasn't mystical. It was deeply empirical knowledge gained through generations of observation and necessity. The human ear, properly trained, can distinguish over 1,500 different sound variations, a capability we've largely abandoned in our visual-dominant modern world. For today's hikers dependent on electronic navigation that can fail, this medieval technique offers something invaluable: a navigation system that works in darkness, fog, or when batteries die, using the one instrument you always have with you, your ears. Medieval sound navigation wasn't primitive. It was a sophisticated use of a sense we've allowed to atrophy, precisely when we might need it most. 7. Communal knowledge networks. The human database. Before books were common, before literacy was widespread, medieval communities developed something modern preppers often overlook: resilient human memory systems that preserved critical survival knowledge without a single page or screen. This wasn't just storytelling. It was a sophisticated information technology using the most reliable storage medium available: distributed human memory. Critical survival knowledge wasn't entrusted to a single elder or expert. It was deliberately spread across the community through specialized memory techniques. One method was the knowledge chain, where specific information was divided among multiple people. One person might know the identifying features of medicinal plants, another their harvesting times, and a third their preparation methods. No individual held all the knowledge, but together, the community retained everything. These memory systems used rhythm, rhyme, and melody as error correction mechanisms. Critical information was encoded in songs or chants where the meter and rhyme scheme made it immediately obvious if something was remembered incorrectly. Some of these knowledge songs contained hundreds of data points about plants, weather patterns, or construction techniques. Physical spaces became memory devices too. Village layouts, field boundaries, and even the arrangement of household items served as physical reminders of information. The location of certain trees or stones triggered specific memories, a landscape that literally contained knowledge. Children were systematically incorporated into these networks, often through games that embedded critical information. A simple counting game might actually be teaching which plants were safe to eat. A singing competition might preserve the proper sequence for a complex task like tanning leather or preserving grain. The most sophisticated aspect was the redundancy. The same critical information would be stored in multiple forms: a song, a story, a physical arrangement, and a game, ensuring that even if one transmission method failed, others would preserve the knowledge. This wasn't primitive oral tradition. It was a human-centered information technology more resilient than any book or hard drive. Books burn, servers fail, but distributed knowledge spread across dozens of minds could survive almost anything. For modern preppers focused on stockpiling survival books that might never be read, this medieval approach offers something profound: a way to ensure critical knowledge remains accessible even when all records are lost, by storing it where it's most useful, in human minds ready to apply it. Medieval knowledge networks weren't simple. They were the ultimate resilient information system, one we've abandoned in our outsourced, device-dependent modern world. We often look at the Middle Ages with a sense of superiority. No technology, no electricity, no modern convenience. But after exploring these 7 forgotten survival techniques, perhaps we should ask a different question. Who's really more vulnerable, them or us? Medieval people didn't just survive. They developed sophisticated systems that worked with available materials and natural processes. They didn't fight nature, they aligned with it. Every technique we've explored reflects a deeper understanding of how the world actually works when stripped of modern infrastructure. They didn't have to learn survival skills. They lived them daily. Knowledge wasn't theoretical. It was practical, tested, and refined through generations of real-world application. Today, we've traded resilience for convenience. We've exchanged knowledge for information. We've replaced community interdependence with isolated independence. And in doing so, we've become more vulnerable than our medieval ancestors in ways we rarely acknowledge. The most powerful medieval survival technique wasn't any specific skill, it was their integrated approach to life. Nothing was wasted, everything had multiple purposes. Systems worked together rather than in isolation. This wasn't primitive thinking, it was systems thinking at its most sophisticated. So the question isn't whether these medieval techniques still work, they do. The question is whether we're humble enough to learn from those we've been taught to view as primitive, because in a world of increasing uncertainty, the most dangerous thing might be our modern arrogance. The belief that we've outgrown the wisdom of those who thrived without any of the systems we now depend on. Medieval people weren't just surviving despite their limitations. In many ways, they were thriving because of them. And that might be the most important survival lesson of all.